This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean. Joining me here today, we have Mr. Jim Marshall. Jim Marshall is the author and the discoverer of Septemics, and we have been diving into and dissecting a little bit more in depth the scales that are within the Septemics philosophy, the mindset, the journey that it is. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jim, give us an introduction so we can get into the next scale for today. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Chris. For those of you viewers who might not know much about me, I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aided the understanding of people, from which I constructed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics, and published it in the book Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. And today we're going to talk about some of the content of that book.
Very good. Here we go.
Okay, so this is the scale of scholarship. So notice it says type. This scale is a linear scale, meaning it's not spiral. There's no apparent congruence between levels 1 and 7, as is the case in the spiral scale. It's a gradual scale, meaning that there's an infinitude of gradations between each level. So you proceed gradually, as opposed to a quantum scale where you are either at 3 or you're at 4 and there's nothing in between. And it's a general scale, meaning once you find your level or another person's level on this, you're done. It's not context driven. Most of the scales are specific scales, meaning it's about a context. You put it in a specific context, which makes it very useful. This is a general scale. So a person is at one of these 7 levels, and it really doesn't have anything to do with context 99.9% of the time. So we should talk about what we mean by scholarship. So scholar is a synonym of student. Student comes from the Latin word studere, which means to desire. Someone who has desire to learn is by definition a student. Desire to learn is the definition of interest. When a person says he has interest, he's saying he has desire to learn that thing. So this scale delineates interest. So there are 7 levels of interest. So at the top of the scale, we have maximal interest, not infinite interest, that's unattainable, but maximal interest. And at the bottom, we have minimal interest, not no interest. Again, that would be an absolute. So that is what we're measuring, this dotted vertical line. That is what this scale delineates, interest. That is what makes a student a good student or a poor student. And that in itself is a new concept to many people. If the student has a lot of interest, he's at or near the top of the scale. And if he has little interest, he's at or near the bottom of the scale. And that is what this is all about. Now, as I explained in the chapter, there are very specific things you can do to make a better student. And I tell you exactly what those are and exactly how to facilitate that transformation. So the student finds his level, whatever that level is, and then you can always move him up to the next higher level. And you don't need to hire a tutor. You don't need to take a class. You don't need to spend any money. Everything that's in this chapter will tell you how to make a better student. So the levels on this scale some of them are known to the education community, but some of them are not. And this will be a real eye-opener to anyone who's involved in education who hasn't seen this yet. Level 7 is the non-student. Well, what is that? What is a non-student? A non-student will not learn. Now, you say, well, if he's a non-student, why is he in class? There's all kinds of reasons why somebody might be in class. His parents are forcing him to be there. the truant officer is forcing him to be there. Maybe he's there because he wants to sell pot to the other students. Maybe he's there because he wants to meet girls. None of these things have anything to do with learning. So you do have these characters in classes, and teachers know exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, most people know. There's always some dopey guy who gets bad grades, cuts up, disturbs the class, is disrespectful. He's not there to learn. He will not learn. You cannot make this person learn. In other words, he is closed. His interest is close enough to zero that he's just not going to learn. Now, this need not necessarily be a stupid person. There are a variety of reasons why somebody might be a non-student. If you have a poor person, he's raised by two ignorant parents, there are no books in the house, that might make him a non-student. He just says, why am I in this room with these other kids, with this teacher up there? He doesn't get it. But there are a lot of other things like dyslexia that can make somebody a non-student, or some sort of a psychological problem. Or, of course, if someone has an extraordinarily low IQ, someone who has a legitimate learning disability of some kind or other. So there are a variety of reasons why you have a non-student. The reasons don't matter for the purposes of this. The main thing you have to know about this is there's nothing you can do to make this person learn. That is what a non-student is. Now, can you move him up to a higher level? Yes. If you have this book and you know how to do it, and you contact him and you work with him, you can move him from level 7 up to level 6. That can be done. Barring that, it's better for everybody involved for this person not to be in the classroom, because this student deters the learning process, because he makes jokes, he fools around, he's disruptive. There's all kinds of bad things. This is the type of guy who drops out of high school. So the teacher needs to know, when you spot this guy, there's nothing you can do about it. This guy should just simply be removed. Now, there are some people who drop out of high school, and then they get out into the real world and find out people don't want to hire them because they don't have a high school diploma. Oh, really? So they work at minimum wage, and they realize, this is terrible. I can't live like this. I'd better go back and get my equivalency diploma or something. So there's actually a world famous writer who was like that. He dropped out of high school. He lived in poverty. And then he said, I'm not doing this. I'm going to go back. Eventually, he got a doctorate. He went to Harvard, went to the University of Chicago, and he became a brilliant writer. So he was not a stupid person. He was just a non-student. like most of the non-students, he didn't want to be there, and he got out of high school. He dropped out. So you're actually doing this person a favor, but more importantly, you're doing the other students a favor by getting rid of this guy. Because this guy will get into mischief. When he should be paying attention, he's doing other things that he shouldn't be doing. There's no limit to how much trouble this type of a person will cause. So if you get him out into the real world and let him work at McDonald's, if even he can get a job at McDonald's, after a while he might wise up and say, well, okay, I'm going to go back. But a lot of these people just become criminals. They join the mafia or the Russian mob, or they become drug dealers or burglars or something, because they can't really make a living because they don't know anything. They don't know how to speak English. And if you talk to a person and he doesn't speak well, that tells you right away a lot about him. And, the person who's interviewing you says, thank you very much. We'll call you. Don't call us. So that's where I've actually made a study of this. Most of the famous criminals were non-students. They couldn't learn for one reason or another, or they didn't learn. They were not willing to learn. Now, if you are willing to learn, you will learn. Abraham Lincoln had, at most, depending on what book you read, 12 months of school total in his whole life, what we would call elementary school. Okay. But he became perhaps the best lawyer in the state of Illinois. And if you read his writings, like the Gettysburg Address, he's brilliant. I mean, he was a brilliant man who had almost no education. He was not a non-student. He'd be there in front of the fireplace reading a book, and his father would ridicule him. What are you wasting your time on that for? Go to bed, because I want you to get up at dawn and milk the cows. That was what he had to contend with, literally. So he was not a non-student. He did not have opportunity, but he somehow got his hands on the book. He taught himself to read and to write, and the rest is history. So let's go up to the next level. Now, the next level here that most people don't know about is what I call the facile student. Facile, in this context, is a derogatory term. This is a person who's kind of slick. He can pronounce the answers to the questions, but it doesn't have anything to do with him. This is pretended learning. The facile student is a very dishonest person. He is running a scam on the teacher, maybe on his parents, on all kinds of people. He is an extremely dishonest person. Now, the non-student might not be dishonest. The non-student, might just say, this is a waste of time. I'm not doing this, and he clicks. That at least is honest. The facile student is not like. The facile student will very often get good grades. Now, whether he does it by cheating on the exam or by stealing the exam answers ahead of time, or by just regurgitating information that doesn't mean anything to him. Like a facile student, for example, in geometry, he will memorize the Pythagorean theorem. Okay. In a right triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. He doesn't understand it. He can't use it. He can't use it to calculate anything. But he's got it in his mind the same way he's got the name of the girl in the next aisle. That's Mary Jane. There's like really no learning involved in this. So but if you talk to him about it, he seems facile. This is why I never say to my students, and I've been teaching since I was 14, I should say tutoring to be more specific. I did a little teaching, but mostly tutoring. I never say, do you understand this or do you know what this means? Never. Because they'll always say yes. I'll say to him, do you know what the word quotidian means? Okay? Or, I'll say, what is the meaning of the word quotidian? And he'll give you sort of a blank stare, and sometimes he'll sort of try to fumble with something. But if I don't get a straight answer in 1 second, I say, okay, let's look it up. So, there's no judgment or invalidating anything. Let's look up the word quotidian. Oh, yeah, I see what it means, And then we go back to the context. Okay, now I'll read it and see if this makes sense to you. So that's why you don't ask, do you know what it means? You ask, what does this mean? Or to continue the analogy from a moment ago, you draw a problem on the board and you say to this guy, Smith, I want you to go up to the whiteboard And I want you to calculate for us the diagonal across this lot of land. See, the data is there. You calculate it for us. If he understands the Pythagorean theorem, he'll be able to do that. So these people very often pass the course. They sometimes get high marks, but they're not getting it. Now, when I say getting it, what I mean is, if you read "Stranger in the Strange Land" by Robert Heinlein, he has a word in there that has sort of come into usage, which is grok, which anybody who's read that knows grok means to understand something in the fullest, deepest sense. Now, in English, we have the word science, which comes from the Latin word scio, or which means I know. Now, scio comes from the Latin verb scire, which means to know in the fullest sense of the word. And that is why science uses that word. That is the semantic construct of that word. It's for example, the acceleration of gravity at the surface, at or near the surface of the Earth, is 32 feet per second per second. We know that. You can calculate it. You don't have to take my word for it. It's in every physics book in the world, but you can go out with a golf ball and a stopwatch if you want and calculate it yourself. You get the same number. Okay, that's known. That's science. So the fast house student is at the opposite end of the spectrum, where he doesn't really know anything. He just sort of has some data in his mind that is not real to him. It's not part of him. It hasn't changed him. Now, every good student in the world has moments in class where he has this epiphany in the class, or perhaps while studying at home. He says, "Oh, now I see this." So you have a teacher, right? And he's talking to you about Napoleon. And you just know that there's this guy named Napoleon Bonaparte who was the head of France and he was in wars. That's about it. But by the time the teacher explains this, a whole thing called the Napoleonic Age. And this involved the history of really the entire Western Hemisphere was wrapped up in this. All the European nations were at war. So this is a big deal. So there'll be a moment when you say, "Oh, now I see. Now I see why they call this the Napoleonic Age." And you see how complex this is, how much went into it, who this guy was. There is a reason why there are hundreds of biographies of Napoleon. He's a compelling person. There's a lot to know about him. And it involves all kinds of other things. It involves the history of England, the history of Germany, the history of Italy, the history of Spain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All gets brought into this when you study. So the student has some epiphany. "Oh, now I get it." See? So when the test comes, he doesn't have to remember it. He knows. He can explain, right? So the essay question says, what was the Napoleonic Age about and how did it affect Europe? And this guy will tell you, see, because he understands it. That's different from the fast house student. The fast house student can regurgitate information. He will tell you that Columbus discovered America in 1492. He doesn't really have any context for this. He doesn't really understand the impact on the Native Americans. He doesn't understand the whole history of the process about the Italians refused to give him the money. Then he went to Spain and Queen Isabella had to sell her jewels to support. It's complicated. He doesn't know any of that, see? But he'll tell you on the test that Columbus discovered America in 1492. That's what he knows. So basically, he's a phony. Okay, but he seems facile to you. He can speak glibly, and this is a guy who will very often sort of try to seem superior to other students, even though he doesn't know it any better than they. But he's kind of a phony and putting on this front to make himself seem superior to them. The other way that you can see this person is this is the guy who years later will boast about the fact that he doesn't remember anything. Did you ever take algebra? Yeah. And he'll say, yeah, and I don't remember anything from it at all. You know, it's like he's not, see, a normal person won't say that. He might not remember anything, but he's not going to boast that he doesn't remember it. This guy will say, yeah, I really pulled a snow job on that history teacher. I had him convinced I knew what I was talking about. See, that's dishonest. He will boast about that. That is what you get with a facile student. Now, the problem with the facile student is they're hard to detect because they're chameleons. They're always posing as good students. See, they're it's like criminals sometimes will dress up as a policeman to commit a crime. It's the same type of a thing. The criminal is as far from a policeman as you're going to get, but he puts on the costume of a policeman so that he can get the bank to open the door or whatever. So that's some of what you see in the facile student. Any questions so far?
No, beautifully explained.
Okay. So now we get up to something that is known by the mainstream, both the parents and the teachers, the poor student. The poor student does not like to learn. This is the kid you have to say, did you do your homework? No. Well, why are you watching TV? Turn off the TV and go do your homework. Oh, Mom, I don't want to do my. You see, he's a poor student. He's a poor student because he doesn't like to learn. He doesn't like to learn because he's a poor student. It's reflexive. Now, this guy is easy to spot. He's not a phony. He's just not a good student. He's poor. He gets bad grades. He fails tests. He gets left back. So when a person doesn't like to learn, he doesn't want to participate in it. So let's look at this in terms of interest. The non-student has no interest, okay? Virtually no interest. He might have a tiny little scintilla of interest, but not enough to learn. The facile student has enough interest to pretend he's learning. That's how much interest he has. He wants to pass the test, or he wants to convince the girl next to him in the class that he's not a stupid person, see? So he looks like he knows what he's talking about, so she'll go out with him. See? Facile. The poor student, now he has enough interest to attempt to be a student, but he fails at it. And because he fails at it, he does not like to learn. Now, a lot of this is the structure of mainstream education, which I totally eviscerate in the chapter on this. I had a career as a tutor fixing the messes that were made by mainstream education. I have somebody come to me who's taking an algebra course, failing, not understanding it. Right? They come to me and I would explain it. And they'd say, oh, okay, I see. And then they would get it. Now, why didn't the teacher do that? Well, he can't do it. He's got 30 kids in the class and he's got a syllabus he has to follow. Okay, it says right there, okay, fifth class, you're going to cover slopes. Okay, so teachers will very often say to you, I understand you guys don't understand this. That's too bad. We have to move on. Have you ever heard that from a teacher? They just tell that's malpractice. Now, the teacher is doing that because he doesn't want to lose his job. He needs to get that check at the end of the week. So That's a perverse incentive. And as I explain in the chapter, learning is an inherently individualistic phenomenon. In other words, this is something that happens within your mind. So it's more intimate than sex. It's more intimate than talking to your closest friend. It's within your mind. Okay. So this guy I just explained in the history class, he has an epiphany about the Napoleonic Age, what this was about. There's a lot to it. It's complicated. And something happened in his mind where the light bulb went on over his head, so to speak. So that's personal. That has nothing to do with the other 29 guys in the class. So that is why I think the future of education is going to be in computers, because you have the whole course, the whole syllabus, everything is in this app, Algebra 1, and you go through it line by line by yourself, has nothing to do with anybody else. The only person who's involved in this is the teacher, who in this context might better be described as a supervisor. So he can say, okay, let's see your check sheet. Okay, you checked off. Okay, so you know how to factor polynomials? Yes. Okay, do one for me. See, he does it. Very good. Go on to the next thing. That's how learning should be. Now, he may have gotten that in the first 2 days if he's very smart. The guy next to him might be struggling with this. He may never get it. He leaves the course, he never gets it. So this scale is, like the rest of Septemics, revolutionary. And I hope teachers will get a hold of this and read it. Now, I suspect a lot of them will reject it because it sort of undermines their belief system. And people don't want that. People want to hear that. Like I've had these fundamentalist Christians come to me and say, well, the world is 6,000 years old. Well, there's something called carbon dating, which is not hard to teach, not hard to learn. It's done all the time. And we can actually determine the age of a rock from the carbon in it. And this rock is 10,000 years old, 50,000 years old, 100,000 years old, 200,000 years old. Like, this is not speculation. So this person obviously is not accepting that. So I might say to such a person, well, what about carbon dating? And he'll probably say, what's that? So people very often do not want to hear about it. Like people who think the earth is flat. Well, that is not only not true, it's physically impossible. If you study physical science, it's completely impossible for the earth to be flat. Moreover, we have massive amounts of data. We have photographs of all the planets in our solar system and the sun and all the moons. They're all spherical. So I don't know. There's something that prevents this person from looking at this data, which is everywhere. It doesn't penetrate. And so you run into that. So I'm sure there are some teachers who will look at this and just dismiss it. I run into these people all the time. Not necessarily teachers, but people who dismiss the subject. They are not going to be penetrated by it because it threatens them. It threatens their self-worth. So the person will read this book and say, wow, I've been going about this all wrong. No wonder I'm having trouble with women. I didn't know about this. You see? Well, that guy is benefiting from this book. He's going to change his thinking and change his behavior, which is what I want. He's going to do better after this. Well, I learned that there's a scale of permeation and there's a scale of sexuality. And see, Or there's a scale of scholarship, and I move myself up that scale. So now when I go on a date, I don't seem like a dope. So that's what I want people to be. And that's happening. But there are all kinds of people who are going to be threatened by this because ego is a powerful issue. So the learning profession would probably have me executed before they would adopt this if it were binary choice. So let's go from the poor student up to the average student. Well, everybody recognizes this. This is the largest group. This person is willing to learn. So he's not necessarily good at it, but he's willing. Okay. Oh, you want to show me the Pythagorean theorem? Okay, I'm willing to learn. You see? That's your average student. Then up from that is the good student. The good student is not merely willing to learn, he learns well. Of course, he's willing to learn. That's why he learns well. He's above level 4. So that's what a good student is. He has enough interest that he learns. He says, oh, this is interesting. Yeah. Now I see what was going on with this. See, he has realizations, which is what is supposed to happen in education. So he gets it. He learns well. Okay. And because he learns well, he gets good grades. Up from that is the very good student. The very good student doesn't merely learn well, he likes to learn. This is fun for him. He enjoys it. So this is a guy who will not only enjoy his formal education, he will be learning things on his own. He'll be going online and learning French with some app because he likes to learn. He's interested. He's interested in learning how to speak French for whatever reason. We don't need to know the reason. He likes to learn. He's a very good student because he likes to learn. And he likes to learn because he's a very good student. And all of that is monitored by interest. This person has a high degree of interest. You can see this. If you look at the student, you can see how interested he is. It's in their eyes. It's on their face. So when I talk to my students, I look at them and I'm very careful to preserve the interest, keep them interested, not go by anything so that I'm squelching their interest. Pay attention to that. I call it student-centered teaching. That's the name of my teaching practice, student-centered teaching. So when I'm working with a student, it's not about me. It's not about the subject matter. It's about the student. So you have to contact the student's interest. So let's say you have some student who's low on the scale, but he loves cars. He goes home and he's fixing cars all the time. Well, if you could connect the fixing of the cars to mathematics and explain that automotive engineers, who are basically mechanical engineers who specialize, this is all done by math. Everything in this car was calculated. Okay? The size of this piston was calculated. Its radius, its length, the material that it's made from, this was all done by calculation. It's all math. You see, and there you might be able to connect to him and sort of bridge him over into an engineering understanding of cars. Then his knowledge of cars will skyrocket because now he knows what he's talking about. Oh, you mean there's potential energy in the gasoline, and we're going to release that. And that potential energy gets converted into mechanical energy, which turns the axis, and that's how the car goes. You see? That's very, very basic engineering. So you can bridge that over. That's what you have to do with a student. You have to contact his interest. And my experience has been, if the person does not have any type of a organic difficulty. In other words, he wasn't born with a learning disability or something like that. You can always do this. You just have to be willing to do it and take the time to do it. And that doesn't happen in classes because although many of the teachers are very nice people who genuinely want to teach, they have people telling them they have to keep up with the syllabus. They have 30 different people. It's chaotic. So very often, even when you have a select student body, there's still a problem because, one guy doesn't understand how to factor polynomials. The other guy knows that, but doesn't understand about calculating the slope of a line, you see? So they're two different students, but they're all lumped in the same class. Now, if the student is at or near the top of the scale, he can resist all of that, meaning he can not be defeated by those things. So, there might be a student who doesn't understand something. He raises his hand. The teacher says, I'm sorry, I can't take any more questions. We have to move on. And the reason for that is he was told by the principal, this is the syllabus. You have to get through the syllabus by the end of the semester. And so he's doing what he was told. That's his job. It's very much like policemen who are told by the higher ups, I understand rioting is going on. You are not to arrest anybody. That happens all the time. I actually know people who are in that position. Whoever it is, the mayor or somebody says, no, we're going to let these rioters just do their thing. And the cops are prevented from doing anything about it. Same thing happens with teachers. The cop is willing to go out there, risk his health, do his job, and arrest somebody who just threw a garbage can through a glass window. Okay? That's a crime. He's willing to do his job. He's prevented. Same thing with teachers. They're often prevented. The other thing is that the teachers don't have this chapter. If they just had this chapter, they would change. They would say, okay, well, this isn't working. Now, a lot of teachers do teach, see that it doesn't work, and then quit and go on and do something else because they see it. In fact, I know somebody who was a policeman who quit because he could see that he was being prevented from executing the laws. He was being prevented from stopping criminals, literally being prevented. He said, I'm not doing this. He quit. Same thing with teachers. So it happens in the military too, where they say, no, I understand there are people over there who are our enemies. We can see them. We know who they are. They're armed. We're not going to go anywhere near them. Okay? The Army guy says, why? That's what I'm here for. See? But he's got to follow orders. So the student who's at level 1, 2, or 3, he has a kind of armor on him. So when these predations hit him that would deter his interest, he can sort of push them off. You see, this student who likes to learn, he realizes his teacher is a dope. But he's not going to let that prevent him from learning about whatever the subject is. He just says, well, I'm in this class. I signed up for it. Now I know that I'm here. This teacher is a dope. All right, I'm just going to deal with it. And he just navigates around it. But if you have a poor student, he cannot do that. He is defeated by this. He will get a D or an F and probably eventually either drop out of college or drop out of high school or whatever, because he does not have enough interest to resist the predations of a dysfunctional education system. And so many students, this is common, I've heard this from many people, many students will say, I did not learn because of the teachers, I learned despite the teachers. I had the same experience myself, not with all teachers. Some of my teachers were wonderful, brilliant people. And they were the people who really made me a polymath. They stoked my interest. But then I get other guys who are just dopey. There's something wrong with them. Who knows what? Maybe they're alcoholics. Maybe they got the job because his brother is the principal. Who knows why they're there. But there are bad teachers, just as in any other profession. And so I was just, I just was not going to allow them to stop me. And I spoke to many other students, who get into elite colleges and get high SAT scores. They say the same thing. The teacher was a deterrence, but I succeeded anyway, despite the teacher. So then we come up to the avid student. The avid student loves to learn. Now, this is something that is not going to be real to many people. Most people do not love to learn, and so they'll think that this is hyperbolic. It's not. The avid student loves to learn. This is the guy, he's enthused. Yippee, I'm going to learn analytic geometry. Yes, he shows up on time, his pencils are sharpened, he's got his notebooks, he's got his calculator. He's going to pay strict attention to everything that teacher says. He loves it. Now, if in case I didn't mention this to you before, I can remember the actual moment in my life when I was 10, when I first discovered that some students didn't like school. I was standing at the chalkboard with another student. They teamed us up, do this problem together. And he said something. I said, wait a minute. You mean you don't like school? He said, no, I hate it. That was such a shocking moment to me. I can still remember it from when I was 10 years old. It was like a big turning point in my life. Because then I said, oh, now I see what's going on. You've got a lot of kids here who don't even like school. To me, that was completely incomprehensible. Now, this kid was a friend of mine, so I could tell from his face and his body language, he was telling me the truth. He wasn't making this up. I mean, at first I was incredulous. Then I said, oh, yeah, some kids don't like school. I couldn't comprehend that. Well, needless to say, I went to schools where it was hard to get in. And so then I was sort of in with people like me. And so that was a pleasant thing for me. I wasn't with people who didn't want to be there. But to me, learning was a fun thing. It was a good thing. I was enthused every morning. I got all dressed up in my uniform. All the schools I went to, we wore uniforms. I got my briefcase. I was all ready to go. Yippee! Today we're going to learn about the Lincoln Highway, or whatever it is. So obviously I was very interested. But I was interested even before I went to school, because I was one of these kids who drove the adults crazy. How does the radiator work? How does the refrigerator work? How does the record player work? How does the car work? How does the gasoline come out of the pump? And when it gets into the car, how does this liquid make the car go? You see, I was interested. And they would say, get out of here, kid. Don't bother me. Go play with your block. I'm busy with my girlfriend here. So there are people who are just naturally interested. Now, generally, what happens in our society, and when I say our society, I don't just mean the United States, I mean industrialized society, is that the interest of the student is deterred. It goes down because most little kids are interested. They want to know, why are you wearing a ring? Oh, what is this thing the ring is made of? It's kind of yellow. Yeah, that's called gold. Oh, gold. What's gold? Well, it comes out of the ground and you melt it and you can make it into the shape. Really? See, they're interested. That's your normal little kid. But by the time this kid gets to the 8th grade, he doesn't want to hear about it. His interest has been deterred by the education system. Now, some of the teachers are better than others. Some of the students are naturally smarter than others, but there's a lot that goes into this. But this scale by itself could revolutionize the entire learning process on Earth in the same way that the Pythagorean theorem revolutionized geometry. It's a cornerstone of geometry in the same way that the periodic table revolutionized chemistry. Wow, did it revolutionize chemistry? It changed the whole landscape of chemistry education. So this scale is like the periodic table for scholarship. Any questions?
No questions. Very good.
Next. Okay, the scale of literacy. Well, at parallel stating what should be obvious, literacy is closely related to scholarship. If you can't read, you're not going to be a good student. So this is a fairly complicated subject. Now, most people think, well, you're literate or you're illiterate. That is a binary choice, and it is incorrect. There are 7 levels of literacy. Now, what most people call illiterate, you have some guy who grows up on the frontier. All he knows about is taking care of his horses and his cows and his goats. Never saw a book, can't sign his name, right? America was pioneered by people like this. He's illiterate. He's at level 7. So if he wants to join the Army or the Navy, and they say you have to sign here, he makes an X. They would literally say to him, he'll say, I can't write. Okay, just make an X. And he would make an X. What's an X? Oh, it's like this. Oh, I see. Okay, I can do that. And he makes the X, and he's in. So now if you look at the scale, level 4 says literate. But in between literate and illiterate are 2 other levels. And most of the people are at those 2 other levels. So we're talking about the majority of the population of the industrialized world is at levels, the existence of which is unknown to most people. So, of course, literacy is problematic. They don't understand it. Now, this is a spiral scale. If you look at level 1 and level 7, level 1 is no literacy is needed. Level 7 is no literacy whatsoever. It's very easy to mistake these two. So you could have somebody who's so advanced, he doesn't even need language. If you have somebody who's fully telepathic, he doesn't need to learn to read or write. You walk in the room, he looks at you, he sees that you're there to buy brown loafers 9 size. He goes and he gets brown loafers here, size 9. You didn't need to say anything to him. He could see it. Now, there are many people who have no reality on this. They'll say, well, such a thing doesn't exist. Well, it does, and it's on the scale. But remember, as I've said before, most people have difficulty grasping the extremes of the scales. They get the middle, but the extremes are hard for them to grasp because they haven't seen it. It's not real to them. This idea of being paraliterate, it's not a concept they have. It's a new idea. Even hyperliterate. What do you mean hyperliterate? They've never seen anybody who's hyperliterate. So they don't know. It's like the unicorn. I've never seen a unicorn. I've seen pictures of it and read stories about it, but I've never actually seen one. So people say, well, it's a myth. That's why I haven't seen one. Okay, well, maybe it is. But we don't really know. What I know for sure is I never saw one. And that's how this is for people, and not just the scale, the other scales too. So this is a gradual scale, meaning there is an infinitude of gradations between every level. So you go gradually from level 5 to level 4, or gradually from level 4 to level 5. This is a general scale, meaning once you spot somebody on this scale, whether it's yourself or another, you're done. Now, you can move up on that scale, but this is not context driven, such as the scale of motivation. You could say, what is my mother's motivation? What is my father's motivation? What is my sister's motivation? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's context driven. This is not that way. It's general. So a person has a general level of literacy. Now, you could say, well, this guy has one level of literacy for his first language, which is English, but his second language, which is Spanish, he's at another level. And I will grant that's true. But I decided to call it a general scale anyway, because that's kind of a special case. But yes, it's true. If you learn a second language or a third language or a fourth language, you kind of have a different level of literacy for each of those. But that's not generally how this is used. This is more generally used in society as far as dealing with a person, because this is really important. And let me tell you what I mean. I have housekeepers that come in and clean my house, right? I've had many, many housekeepers over the years. And so I know these people are not particularly literate people. That's why they're housekeepers. I'm not criticizing them. That's just where they are. They're usually at level 5 or 6. Now, I'm not going to speak to them the same way I speak to a friend of mine who holds 4 degrees. You know, I have a friend of mine who has 4 college degrees. Very smart person. I can talk right at her, right straight across. She gets it. Now, there might be a word. She might say, what's that? Well, then I tell her. But that's part of being literate, that you can see that you don't know what that word means and you ask. That's what smart people do. So let's look at the vertical dotted line. This is about comprehension. Literacy is monitored by comprehension. That's why we have reading comprehension tests, right? We give the student a test, we give them something to read, and then we ask them questions. What color dress was Jane wearing? Why did Jane want to go to the store? And so he has to answer the questions, and we get a score. And so we get reading comprehension. So that is what this is about. So to the degree that the person comprehends it, he's literate. So that's what this scale is measuring. Now, notice we have 2 horizontal lines, because this is so important, it impacts society. People who are illiterate make up a primitive society. So this is an anthropological category, or perhaps tangentially a sociological category. So let's say you have Native Americans. Okay, they lived in the forest. They had no reading or writing of any kind. They had no schools. The father taught the boy how to make a bow and arrow. The mother taught the girl how to cook the food. That was it. Okay, that's a primitive society. So whether you're talking about in Africa or South Sea Islands or Native Americans or whatever, at some point, all of these places were populated by primitive societies. Primitive societies have no literacy. Now, you could say, well, wait a minute, these people can speak. And I will accede that is a type of literacy. So that is mostly relevant because you can spot somebody's literacy by listening to him speak. So, for example, I'll be standing in line at the grocery store. 2 people behind me I've never met, don't know who they are having a conversation. I can determine the level of person A and or person B on the scale by just listening to them speak. So if somebody says, I ain't got no money, that person is not literate. He's either at 5 or 6. See? And if I listen to him more, I can get it exact. So that's useful to you. You can listen to someone speak. So, for example, let's say you listen to a video, a podcast of Elon Musk being interviewed. There's probably over 100 of them, right? You listen to him speak. There's no reading or writing involved in this process. You are sitting there listening to him talk to this other guy. But you can tell how literate he is by how he speaks. It's patently obvious, if you know the scale, that he's very high on the scale. See, you haven't given him a reading comprehension test. You don't need to. So the spoken element of it is primarily relevant in terms of you can use it to spot somebody, which is very useful. Because let's say I used to be in the music business. So let's say I'm hiring a musician. If this guy comes in and I can tell by his speech that he really knows music, great. That's a reason to hire him. See? But if I say, well, in Black Sabbath, they use the tritone. He says, what? What's that? He doesn't know what a tritone is. He may not even know about that song, you see? So just by talking to him, I'm finding out he doesn't know. He doesn't know about this. So I might say, well, here's what a tritone is, see? And just from that conversation, I could find out about a lot. I might find out that he doesn't know any music theory. He's one of these guys who just picked up a bass guitar, listened to records, figured it out that way. So that might not be a guy I want to hire. And all this was done by just talking to him. See? So that's the relevance of language in this, spoken language, as opposed to literacy, which usually means reading and writing. Okay, so we go above the primitive level, we get into the barbaric level. Now, this will come as a disappointment to many people, but industrialized society on Earth is barbaric. There is no Earth civilization. There are particular persons who are civilized. These are people who are literate. Because they're literate, they're civilized. For example, there are no clergy who are illiterate. Some of them are more literate than others, but most of them are quite literate. Because in order to become a priest or a minister or a rabbi or an imam or what, you have to study. In whatever faith you're in, you have to go to the monastery or the ashram or the college, and you have to study. That's how you get to be the priest. So there are virtually no illiterate clergymen. It's just like if you go amongst the scientific community, there are no illiterate scientists. You can't be a scientist if you're illiterate, because in order to learn science, you have to be able to read. Now, are many of them at level 5 or 6? Yes. You can listen to, and I do this all the time, listen to engineers, scientists, mathematicians. You can tell by listening to them that they are not literate people. They know their subject very well. But you can find a guy who has, let's say, a doctorate in math. He does not know the difference between a gerundial and a participle. Okay, that is a part of the English language. He says, what's gerund? He doesn't know. So that's somebody who's probably at level 5. That doesn't mean he's not a good mathematician. So this is complicated. So the reason I say that Earth society is barbaric is the overwhelming majority of people are at or below level 5. It's a small minority of people that are level 1, 2, 3, or 4. And this is news to many people. And I'll give you an anecdote that underscores this. I know somebody who is a doctor, a successful surgeon. This is not somebody who just went to medical school. This is somebody who's making a good living, and is in demand as a surgeon, right? A friend of mine. And I had read a novel, a very famous, world famous novel that I liked very much. And so I thought, just, as a nice thing, because this is my friend, I'm going to let her read this. So I said, here, this is a great book. Read it. She said, okay. She took it. Well, I saw that person like a week or two later, and she hands me back the book and said, and I quote, I can't read this. You would think that a practicing doctor who is skilled in surgery is going to be able to read a popular novel. That was not the case. And I can tell you, I know people who went to medical school and so forth. They're not necessarily the brightest people around. So I'm not knocking doctors. I'm just saying you cannot assume that because a person has a graduate degree, that he's literate. Factually, it is not true. I see this all the time on the internet, all the time. Because as a serious student of science, engineering, and mathematics, I am almost daily listening to videos that are about those subjects. So I listen to Dr. Brian Greene, Dr. Sean Carroll, Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, et cetera, et cetera. I listen to these people, right? And I understand exactly what they're saying, because I have this background. And very often you'll hear them speak in ways that make it clear that as regards the English language, they're not literate. Now, I'm not knocking any of those three people. I'm just saying this happens. So that's the first thing you have to realize. Don't conflate having a degree with being literate. Because again, you have somebody like Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton never got a degree. He left King's College, which is now known as Columbia University, to fight in the Revolutionary War. He became not only George Washington's right-hand man, Hamilton was a colonel at the age of 22 because he was so brilliant. And Washington kept him at his elbow for the whole war. He was so smart, he did not want to have him go anywhere. And Hamilton kept saying, give me a command, let me fight. No, I need you here. That's how smart he was. Never got a degree. Abe Lincoln. Forget about a degree. He never even went to high school. So there are plenty of smart people. Even some of them are quite literate. If you read Lincoln's Gettysburg Address and Second Inaugural Address, they are extremely literate. They're exquisitely written. His prose was on a par with Charles Dickens, one of the great English novelists. So you can't say, well, how could he be literate? He didn't go to school. That is not, the correlation is, does he comprehend it or not? Well, Lincoln did it himself. He taught himself. Another example is Edison. Edison didn't even go to school. His mother taught him to read and write and do math. So here's the guy who invents the light bulb, who invents the phonograph. He changed the world. Didn't go to school. Now, was he a particularly literate person? No. But he certainly knew his subject. I haven't made a study of him on this subject, but he may have been semi-literate. As opposed to Nikola Tesla, who did go to college, who did get a degree, who was certainly a literate person. I guess he was a genius in his field, but he was also literate. So it's really important to use level 5 and 6 because you're going to find a large majority of people at these levels. So this is more true now than it was 50 or 60 years ago in the United States and in industrialized society in general. The United States, I know much better because I've lived here my whole life. But for example, if you listen to people on TV or on podcasts, YouTube, whatever, I'm talking about professionals, professional broadcasters, famous people, Megyn Kelly, Bill O'Reilly. An earlier generation was Walter Cronkite. Now, in the time of Walter Cronkite was a literate person. He would stick out like a sore thumb now. Most of the people who are professional communicators now are not literate people. Just listen to them speak. They do not speak properly. Now, 60 years ago, anybody who was a professional communicator, such as John Charles Daly, John Cameron Swayze, Harry Von Zell, Steve Allen, these were all famous radio and TV personalities. All of them spoke perfect English. They were highly literate persons. They never made a grammatical error. They never mispronounced a word. They never spoke in the vernacular. They spoke the king's English. That now is an endangered species. You can barely find anybody now who speaks like that. When William F. Buckley died, that was sort of like the end of that generation of people. Of course, there are exceptions. Obviously, Jordan Peterson is a highly literate person. I'm not giving any levels. I'm just saying it's obvious. He's literate. Anybody who pays attention to him can see that. Even the people who are barbaric can see that. But most of the people are at levels 5, 6, or 7. Now, 7 has been disappearing because literacy has been going into all kinds of places now that 100 years ago didn't exist, like sub-Saharan Africa, the Aboriginals in Australia. Most of these people are not illiterate now. Many of them are subliterate. And again, I don't mean to criticize anybody. I'm just telling you what's there. Now, subliterate is a beginner. This is what you get in a little kid. So you talk to let's say some 4-year-old kid. Well, he can speak English. You can have a conversation with him. You can say, "How are you, Johnny?" He says, "Fine." And you say, "Did you have lunch?" He says, "Yes." "What did you have?" "Well, I had a sandwich and a glass of milk." See, you're conversing in English. Okay. And you ask him, "Can you write your name?" "Yes, I can write John." And he writes it in block letters. That is level 6. He's subliterate. He's not what I would call a literate person. He's a beginner. Now, in the industrialized world, eventually, as he grows older, he'll go to school, he'll move up to level 5, he'll move up to level 4, and so forth. That's what a beginner is. So, for example, if somebody is just learning Spanish, you try to converse with him in Spanish. He's halting. He knows some words. He doesn't know other words. He doesn't know the grammar. You can kind of have a conversation. So this is why, for example, if I were to go to Italy, because I know some Italian, I could get by enough to not starve to death, find a hotel, get a taxi, because I'm kind of subliterate in Italian. I can kind of have a conversation. I can listen to them and hear, kind of understand what they're saying. Okay? But that doesn't make me literate. It's just enough to be subliterate. Now, up from subliterate is semi-literate. A semi-literate person doesn't know the grammar well, has a limited vocabulary, So this is the type of person where you don't want to say it's immense. You might just want to say it's big. Now, if he knows what immense means, he probably doesn't really know that it means literally so big that nobody can measure it, which is what the word immense means. He probably doesn't know that. So, for example, if I'm writing and I come to a place, I'm going to choose, do I want big, giant, gigantic, immense, enormous, and so forth? I'm going to select the one. See, something can be gigantic, but not be immense. Like the national debt of the United States exceeds $34 trillion now. That's gigantic, but it's not immense. We know what it is. I just told you what it is. See, we can measure it. What is immense is the size of the universe. That's immense. How do you measure that? So that sort of subtlety you do not get from a semi-literate person. So if you say immense, he kind of knows what it means. He doesn't stop you and say, what do you mean by that? But a semi-literate person will sometimes ridicule you for speaking that way. Like you knock on the door, he says, "Who is it?" And if you say, "It is I, Jim," he'll laugh at you. It is I? What is that? That is proper English. It is me is wrong. It's grammatically incorrect. So he will make fun of you. That is what you get from a semi-literate person. This is the type. I had one student of mine who gratuitously said, "I don't want to know Shakespeare. I don't want to hear about Shakespeare. I don't want to know it." This person was like dismissing Shakespeare, the greatest drama genius, possibly the greatest poet in the English language. Okay, didn't want to hear about it. Didn't want to know it. Wasn't going to study it. You know, I don't even know why she was telling me this, but this person was saying, "I am semi-literate." Now, that makes sense to me. I mean, if a person is semi-literate, he's not going to want to read Macbeth or go see the play. He's not going to want to do that. He might want to go to a rodeo or to a baseball game or football game, but he's not going to want to go to see a Shakespearean play, okay? Because he's semi-literate. And I can tell you, having been exposed heavily to Shakespeare, if you're not literate, you're not going to get it. I mean, if you say an oft quoted phrase, "Methink the lady protesteth too much," a semi-literate person say, "What? What are you talking about?" See, people who study Shakespeare, they know that's a quote, and they know exactly what it means. But semi-literate people will sort of laugh at you. What the hell are you talking about? Because they don't understand it. So these are barbaric people. They're not civilized people. If you observe their behavior, these people will commit crimes. They will do unethical things. They're not civilized. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who's literate is not going to commit a crime. That's not true. But generally speaking, if you look at human society, which I do every day and I've been doing my whole life, it's barbaric. Look at what just happened in Israel 2 months ago. Look at what happened with all the riots in the United States a couple of years ago. Look at the horrendous, out of control crime that goes on in the United States now. It's totally out of control. Like in Chicago, on Monday, they looked for the report to see how many people were murdered. It's like an automatic. How many people this weekend? 4. Oh, that's not bad. For Chicago, that's not bad. For Chicago, a bad weekend is like 18. Oh, wow, that was a bad weekend. See, that's barbaric. So in a civilized place, the fact that anybody was murdered would be an outrage. Now, there are enclaves of civilization. If you go to a private school, okay, within that school, the teachers are vetted. The students have to take a test to get in. We have to wear a uniform. The parents have to pay tuition. There are a lot of reasons to keep you out. In other words, there are a lot of countervailing forces. And the people who overcome those forces and get into that school are going to be civilized people, or at least the children of civilized people. See, those parents were civilized enough to say, okay, we're going to spend $5,000 a year to send our son to Exeter because we want him to have this excellent education, which Exeter has been famous for many generations. So that's why these lines are there. And that tells you a lot of what's going on in our civilization. Now, when I say civilization, I say that in quotes because there is no Earth civilization. So, for example, if you go into an ashram where people are studying Hinduism, okay? These are civilized people. These are nonviolent people. These are people who are not going to steal your wallet when you're in the pool. Okay? They're civilized people. So, yes, there are enclaves. But in general, no. Earth is a barbaric place. And you see this all the time. Just turn on the news. I don't care what country you're in, turn on the news and you will see it. For example, the fact that over 100,000 Americans a year are killed by fentanyl, and nothing has been done to stop that. That's barbaric. It's an epidemic. I mean, if some country came in here and killed 100,000 young Americans, that's a reason to go to war. I mean, Pearl Harbor killed about 2,400 people. That's nothing compared to what is going on with fentanyl. And nothing is done about it. That's barbaric. Now, some people are trying to do something about it, but you can't say this is a civilized country because it hasn't happened. This has gone on for years and everybody knows it. So let's go up now into the civilized band. A literate person is a person who is fluent in the language. Okay? He can read the language, can speak the language, he can write the language. That's what fluency is. So this person, he knows the vocabulary, he knows the grammar, and he can do very well. This is not a person, like if you give this person a contract, here's the homeowner's contract, I want you to, he can read that contract. He may have to look up a couple of words. He might say, well, tell me, Mr. Lawyer, what does this word mean? Indemnity, and he'll tell you. That's why we have lawyers. But the person is literate. Now, if you give this to a semi-literate person, he is lost. So how does this work? You go on the internet, right? And you sign up for something, right? Most people have hundreds and hundreds of these, right? We do this every day. And you pick out your name, your password, and then you have to check a box to say that I have read the fine print. Did you ever look at the fine print? Oh boy. You have to have a law degree to understand this. This was written by lawyers to protect the corporation who's putting up this site. What percentage of people actually read that? And beyond that, of the ones who even bother to read it, how many actually understand it? Now, everybody knows, let's be honest, almost nobody reads those things. They just check the box and they join. Guy wants to join a dating site. He was looking for a girlfriend. He finds some dating site and he has to check this. He just checks the box. He doesn't know what the fine print says. He never even looked at it. Now, some sites, which I think is wise, will require you to scroll through it. So at least there's some kind of a pretense that you're looking at it. Or they can say, Your Honor, our site requires the person to scroll through it, and we know he did, because if he didn't, he wouldn't have been able to sign up. See, that's a smart legal ploy to protect yourself in court from the guy who comes and says, I didn't know this. Oh, really? It's right there in black and white. So that's what I mean when I say it's a barbaric society. So you have billions of people going online all the time, every day, checking the box, never read the thing. That's barbaric. So even if you have somebody who's literate, he's going to say, wait a minute, I only have 15 minutes here. I got to get back to work. It'll take me 2 hours to read this thing. So he just checks the box. You see? It's expedient, but it's not civilized. So above literate is very literate. This is the level of the intellectual. So this is a guy who nearly always has a college degree and mostly a graduate degree. Now, if a person has a graduate degree in a language-oriented subject like English or psychology or history, okay, and he has a graduate degree, this guy can read. If a guy has a graduate degree in math or science or engineering, that doesn't mean he can read. He can still be semi-literate, because you don't have to read that well in order to get a graduate degree in engineering, for example. There's millions and millions of engineers who are semi-literate. Doctors, all kinds of people. Lawyers, no, because you have to be able to read. When you go to law school, they say, okay, today we're going to read Marbury versus Madison. Be ready with it tomorrow morning. So you have to go home and read Marbury versus Madison. And it's not that easy to read because it was written 200 years ago. So you have to look up words, and so lawyers are literate people. That is why they know how to write contracts. They know how to read contracts. They know how to parse the testimony. They know how to phrase the questions to elicit the answers they're looking for. Or in some cases, to manipulate the person into saying something that would be advantageous to the lawyer's case. But anyway, they're literate. Historians are illiterate. So, you read a history book that was written by Dr. Smith, who has a PhD in history. That's a literate person. He's probably very literate, meaning level 3, in order to have gotten that degree. But again, you have Abe Lincoln. He was certainly very literate. Never went to school, but he was a brilliant person. He taught himself, he was motivated. And I'm sure there were thousands of times when he would be sitting there by candlelight or by the fire, reading a book, when he could have been out getting drunk with his friends and having fun and chasing girls. But he didn't do that. He chose to educate himself because he was smart and he was motivated. So here's a guy with no schooling who's at level 3. See, so that's why the scale of literacy and the scale of scholarship are two different things. Above very literate is hyperliterate. Very few people get to this level. This is somebody who is brilliant. If you listen to someone speak, and especially if you are literate yourself, and you say, wow, this guy's brilliant. That's probably a hyperliterate person. And I'll give you a historical example. William F. Buckley was hyperliterate. I'm not endorsing any of his positions. I'm not saying you should agree with him, but he unquestionably was hyperliterate. All right? He wrote dozens of books, hundreds of essays, most of which I read. They're awesome. In terms of literature, his usage of the language was as good as it gets. Honestly, having read Dickens and Thomas Hardy and George Mead, all the great writers in English, none of them wrote better than William F. Buckley. None of them. And again, I'm not saying that that means I endorse his position. That's a completely separate thing. It has nothing to do with it. For example, if you read Cicero, the greatest Roman statesman, he said many things that I disagree with, but I still know he was hyperliterate. He was brilliant. He was the most brilliant person probably in Rome at that time, which is why we're still talking about him. Latin students in their third year of Latin read Cicero. That has been going on since he died 2,000 years ago. You go into a school that teaches Latin, when you get to the third year, they read Cicero. Why is that? Because his Latin prose is flawless, as opposed to Caesar. Caesar wrote prose. They teach that to sophomores in Latin. His prose was not flawless. He got the idea across. He was not going into complex ideas about the nature of society, the nature of mankind, about the psychology of people. He was just saying, the Germans attacked us, we had 11 legions, and here's how we killed them all. See, pretty simple stuff. That's what you read as a sophomore, because it's pretty simple stuff. So he was not brilliant. He wasn't even intellectual. Was he literate? Yes, he was literate. And when he was conquering Gaul for many years, he would have a battle, the reports would come in, and he would write a report. This is what happened. This is how many men we lost. This is how many spears we collected. This is how it happened. He tells the whole, and that would be sent back to Rome. Some messenger would take the scroll, and ride back to Rome with that. And the Senate would read. It would be read by the Senate. Well, we still have those. So we know how literate he was. He was not an intellectual. Same thing with George Washington. That's why George Washington needed Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was brilliant. George Washington was a farmer and a surveyor and a soldier. None of those things require one to be an intellectual. He was not an intellectual. Was he a great man? Yes. Did he perform miracles? Yes. But it's not because of his literacy. It's because of his character. He was fearless. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He was a truly great leader, as good as they come in history. So, again, was he semi-literate? Literate? We have his writings. He was probably literate. So if you read Washington, and there's a lot to be read by Washington, he was literate, but he wasn't very literate or hyperliterate. So was he a civilized person? Yes, he was a civilized person. But you see, I'm parsing this. I'm telling you how to separate these things. Like Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr was a very smart man. He was an intellectual. Was he a good person? No. He committed treason. He tried to break off a piece of the United States. He killed Alexander Hamilton. So we're not talking about a nice person, but he was quite literate. So let's go to the top now, which is going to exceed the reality of most people, which is paraliterate. Now, paraliterate would be somebody who is telepathic. This is somebody who can communicate with people telepathically. He can communicate with angels. He can communicate with people who are deceased. There are people around. I know some of them. They can do this. These people can communicate with animals. I have a friend who has a profession taking care of animals. People who have troubled animals bring them to this person. She literally communicates with them telepathically. She figures out exactly what's wrong. And she'll tell the owner, okay, here's the problem with this dog. This dog is afraid of loud noises. He's afraid of thunder. He's afraid of motorcycles that go by. He's afraid when the door slams. And the owner says, I didn't know that. You know why the owner didn't know it? The dog didn't tell him, because dogs don't talk. So this person, that is actually what this person does for a living. And not just dogs, cats, birds. This person can literally telepathically communicate. I have another friend of mine who tells a story about having a telepathic communication with a tree. He told me the whole conversation he had with this tree. So that's paraliterate. This person doesn't need a language. This person is beyond language. Now, of course, these friends of mine know how to read and write English. That's incidental to what I'm pointing out here. There are paraliterate persons. So you could have somebody who perhaps is so telepathic that he doesn't even bother to learn to read or write. Why would he want to do that? He knows exactly what his wife is thinking. He knows exactly what his son is thinking. He knows exactly what his boss wants from him. Now, the way our society is structured, it's kind of difficult to get along if you can't read or write. But this guy who's paraliterate might just be able to get by as a semi-literate. So in other words, he does not know language very well because he doesn't need to. So this is the type of person, he's getting audited by the IRS. He will telepathically link with the agent who is taking his case, and he will know what that agent is looking for, what that agent suspects, and he can prepare the whole thing. And he goes in and sees the agent, and everything is there. So this is the type of person who he'll go out on a date with the girl, and he knows exactly what she thinks, what she wants, and he says all the right things because he's telepathic. So that's what paraliterate is about. That's no literacy needed. And just parenthetically, it's not immediately relevant to the scale because remember, this is hierarchies of human phenomena. This is about humans. But just for a moment, let's talk about angels. Angels are non-corporeal, benevolent beings. 80% of Americans believe in angels. Everywhere in the world you go, people believe in angels. They just call them different things in different languages. Okay? So this is a well-accepted thing, well-accepted meme, you might say. So there are millions and millions of people who communicate with angels, who've seen angels, who have interactions with angels, okay? Angels are paraliterate. They have no bodies. So they don't need a language. They communicate telepathically. That tells you what you have to do in order to be an angel. If you are not telepathic, you can't be an angel. So angels, and this is available from many, many sources, angels are paraliterate. Now that is, as I said, that's sort of tangential to this discussion. It goes beyond Septemics. I'm just laying that out. As you want to find somebody who's paraliterate, talk to an angel. And I can tell you it's not that hard, depending on, how much telepathy you have. Now, everybody has some telepathy, but most people don't know that they're telepathic. And even if they do know, it's very limited. So they might not be able to talk to angels. But there are lots of people who are telepathic and know it and are up to talking to angels. And many of them can talk to trees and devic entities and all kinds of other things. This is not new. It's very well documented all over the world. So that's my comment on literacy. Any questions?
No, excuse me. No, very very good. And I think that's a good place to stop for today. Jim, hey,
Okay.
thank you for your insight on those. I think that the way I'm sure that it was by design, but I think that the way we linked those two together, they piggybacked off of each other. They related well to each other, and that worked out very good for the conversation today. Do you have any final takeaways for today?
Yes, I agree with what you said, but as I said before, they're distinct. A person, like you have somebody who never went to school, how can you call him a scholar? You know, but it didn't hurt Edison and it didn't hurt Lincoln and a lot of other people too. So, they're two different things. There are people who are very smart, not terribly literate. They're just smart. It's a different thing. You know, like there are people in organized crime who are quite shrewd. They're not stupid people, but they're mostly semi-literate. Some of them are subliterate. A lot of them are subliterate. So, scholarship and literacy, they're separate things. It's hard to really separate them, but they are two different scales. And as you can see, they're structured very differently. And the impact on society of those two scales is quite different. The structure of it is distinct. So I just want to invite anyone who's interested, go to my website, septemics.com, where you can see what many people have said about this, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself. And if you want, you can listen to a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics for new people. So I invite you. And then you'll find out about the subject and see if you want to get into it.
Very good. Well, Jim, again, thank you. Appreciate the time that you've spent, the dedication for this, and I look forward to our next journey as we delve further into the scales of Septemics. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.